Hi, everyone. Whether you've joined us live or you're joining us later on YouTube, welcome. This is a very special episode of the Quilt District, and we're talking with the infamous Roderick Kiracofe, who has, look him up, author, collector. He's been around and influential in this world for quite a few years. So I'm so excited to pick his brain about what he looks for when he's collecting quilts. And the wonderful Sarah Walcott, the curator of collections at the International Quilt Museum. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Joining us to give us some museum perspective and insight on this exhibition. So what we're going to do today is go through the actual gallery, but we're going to do it virtually. We're going to walk through. So Rod and Sarah, do you see the gallery now?
Yes.
Excellent.
Looks
Excellent. Good. Isn't it gorgeous? So who hung the show? Tell us maybe a little bit about that really quickly, Sarah.
Our team, our wonderful exhibitions team, Camilo Sanchez and Melissa Slayton, are our curator of exhibitions and our assistant curator of exhibitions, respectively, along with our wonderful team of interns and volunteers. And then Jamie Swartz, our Swiss Army knife of a collections manager, did the lighting, beautiful as always.
Wonderful. Yeah, you guys have a stellar team up there at International Quilt Museum. Yeah, you're a really, really stellar team. All right, so as we enter, now folks, you can do this at home yourselves too. The International Quilt Museum puts up a lot of these virtual galleries for you to be able to walk through. I'm just going to turn us around to show you what it looks like outside in kind of the lobby space of that top floor there. And as you then enter this gallery, all of this deliciousness is in front of you. But Rod, we're going to move down to the Pegasus first, aren't we?
Well, let's stay right here for a moment.
Okay.
I want to thank International Quilt Museum, of course, for having this exhibition of having quilts from my collection at the International Quilt Museum, and to having this show up at this time. And a big shout out to Camilo Sanchez. I've just have been so impressed with all of the shows that he's done at the museum. And so, of course, I get nervous. Oh, like, what are my quilts going to look like? And I feel like he's done a fantastic job. What I love is the perspective from this. You're entering the gallery right here, looking down to the end where Pegasus hangs. And then just the way I didn't ask Camilo if he had done it this way, but to me, I just see that flag of the Pegasus kind of flying, and then how the other quilts are hung in the gallery. To me, just have that same kind of flying, moving through the air quality, which I love. I love seeing quilts not flat on the wall. They look great that way. They also look great hanging out. And then I think we'll be able to see a number of the quilts have a backside that is either a second quilt or of just what I found really, really interesting of what how the maker did the back. And then Tara, I also sent you pictures because things like the Pegasus have a wonderful back. And we're going to be able to show that.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So yeah, oh, and then also I noticed just the way the benches are zigzagging down the center of the gallery. I felt was a really nice, unexpected or unconventional way. So I love the whole package.
Yeah.
And again, and shout out and thanks to Sarah and Jamie for their work in mounting any exhibition. So,
They, they've created these intimate spaces
Right.
within the gallery with the way the benches are focused on those certain quilts that are flying,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know. That's really interesting. It allows you to have that quiet moment with it and study it, right?
Mhm. Exactly.
I'm going to move us down to Pegasus.
Yeah. So let's like go down to the very end and stand in front of Pegasus. Um, I bought this quilt in 2007. I kind of the quilt collection essentially started in 2004, but then once I got into it a little bit in that first year of collecting, I realized I had started in 1998 when I bought three quilts from um, yes, and I know the names just Scott Heffley in Kansas City, who I met at the Nelson Atkins Museum. We're gonna, when we come around the gallery to the quilt with the number eights on it or the infinity sign, I'll tell a little bit more about Scott Heffley. But um, to me, this is just one of the greatest quilts in the collection. This quilt is still in my collection. It's not at International Quilt Museum or another museum, possibly. But I've always loved advertising, memorabilia kinds of things. When I first started going to farm and auctions in Indiana as a teenager, I liked advertising things. This Pegasus was the um, logo for a oil company called the Saucony Vacuum Oil Company in Texas. Later to have been be acquired by Mobil Oil, Mobil Gas, Mobil Oil, and they continued to use Pegasus. So this red Pegasus is actually on a flag, on a banner that would have been stuck in the ground out in front of um, Saucony vacuum oil gas station. And I've seen old photographs where there could be multiple flags with this Pegasus on it. So how this maker acquired the flag is a wonderful mystery. We don't know. We don't know the maker of this quilt. You can see just from this angle, or if we go even in any closer, it's been patched, it's been repaired. It was of use and value to this maker. How she came to then place it on a background and create a quilt. It is a tied quilt. Um, I think it's just incredible. And of course, I'm biased, but um, the other thing that just strikes me so is to me, I see it as a piece of pop art. People may be familiar with Andy Warhol's use of this Pegasus logo in some of his artwork, which I think began to be seen in about 1987. Um, this logo, this flag would have been, I think, kind of from the 20s or the 30s. Um, but the fact that she places this on this blue background, again, I kind of see it as a sky. Um, the lines of the thread, and it's a pretty thick thread. Um, let's flip it over and see the back,
Okay.
if that's easy to do.
I will figure it out just as quickly as I
Okay.
can.
And if not, then we'll just continue on. But
Here we
okay,
go.
here is the back. This bar's back where the actual ties are very visible, but on the front side, you see these little white lines going throughout. Um, on the right, there's some blank space there in the blue and brown bars towards the right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did those ties wear out and fall out, or did she not put them there? Again, wonderful mysteries of these, you know, anonymous maker or once named maker, which this happens to be. But again, the backside to me makes me think of a Sean Scully painting. So a lot of the quilts in the collection, I really was looking at from an art eye, an art appreciation eye, and seeing how a lot of these quilts spoke to, in my opinion, the art that was happening in American art in like the modern art period and contemporary art. And they still, to me, hold that place of just these incredible, they can be works of art as well as somebody slept under this. I absolutely know that this was used.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I have a question for you, Rod.
yes.
You mentioned one of the things you're doing when you're looking at quilts is seeing them as works of art and looking for those indicators there. Do you believe that the modern art movements of the 20th century were happening in correlation with the perhaps some of these modern aesthetics and quilts, or do you see that one preceded the other, or have you any
Well,
opinion that you want to share on that?
yeah, clearly. Well, I'll step back just when I look at quilts, I am looking at them kind of from two vantage points. I always look at them as 99% of the time, a woman made this. Do we know that woman's name, or is she anonymous? Um, and the fact that yes, many of the quilts hanging here in the collection, they were slept under, they were used, they were bed coverings, they kept people warm. And and then when there is a maker's name, to be able to locate her in the place where she made this, it's wonderful to have that background along with the quilt. But I have always looked at a quilt of just how it can transcend that and go
Mhm.
from a bed, flat, horizontal, to a wall and be responded to from a very kind of artistic place. And in a case like this, to me, it's this definitely was a piece of pop art before Andy Warhol and other pop artists were creating pop art,
Yeah,
which I just find kind of fabulous that this exists. Um,
absolutely. And we have several lovers of this Pegasus in our chat. And this is a really nice comment. Jody Sanders says that Rod taught me to appreciate unconventional quilts.
Thank you.
Yeah, pretty cool. Well, let's move on to our next
Yeah,
one here.
we're gonna. So the next one, this one patch is again. I went looking for quilts. I just was looking for quilts that appealed to my eye, that just struck a chord with me. I love tied quilts, and as I was going through this and kind of looking at other presentations that have been done of the collection, there are a lot of tied quilts in the collection, and I've always loved them. Coming from a place in the late 70s, early 80s as a dealer, a tied quilt was not of any interest to any collector whatsoever. They were just kind of considered the bottom of the barrel type of quilts.
Mhm.
I've always loved and appreciated them. But as was on this search and journey, I came across just some incredible, I'd never seen another tied quilt like this. These, they're pom-poms. I, I don't have a picture of one, or can we go in? How close can
Yeah.
we go in? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like a bunny tail on a little stuffed bunny rabbit toy for a child. They're just enormous. The other fun thing about this piece was it's all double knit polyester fabric. And at first, when I started seeing those out in the marketplace, I thought, oh my gosh. And then it was like, oh, yes, oh my gosh, that is part of this last half of the 20th century history of the fabrics that women had available and were using. They were cutting up their polyester pantsuits and their husbands' polyester sport coats and making quilts now. And anyone that knows about making a quilt, to tie it is a much easier process. It doesn't require many ties to hold the three layers together. But why did she decide to do this? I'm so grateful that she did. It came out of Arkansas, don't have a maker's name with it. And then the other piece, if you can pull back, I began to see as I was collecting, it often was the color red in a quilt that might just, to me, feel like the exclamation point that she put in. And here, a simple one patch quilt pattern, um, but with the three-dimensionality of those ties, and then her one red block up there, upper right corner. Yeah, it just was a piece de resistance for me in putting that quilt into my collection.
Woo.
This
Yeah.
this is
Right.
in the this is part of the IQM Roderick Kiracofe collection.
And so then, Sarah, that I'd like to ask you, what was it about the pieces that you did bring into the International Quilt Museum's collection of rods? What was it that drew the museum to those pieces, and what was it about those pieces that you guys felt was helping to complete the collection there, the permanent collection?
Well, Rod can help me answer that question. I feel like it was really a conversation and a collaboration, relying on Rod's own very deep expertise about quilts in general and these quilts that sort of embody the spirit of his writing and collecting. Um, the pieces that are in our collection, I think, for us are a beautiful representation of just what is happening in quilt making that is somewhat non-traditional, that
Mhm.
is, to use Rod's own words, unconventional, unexpected, um, and just to kind of add that into our collection, represent that the same way that we might represent a 19th century Baltimore album or something. I think it's so important that we're not just showing what people what traditionalists were creating, which we obviously want to represent, but also what
Right.
non-traditionalists were creating and have created. It's there's a long history of quilt makers using available materials in a really interesting and fun way. And I was just thinking as we were zooming in on this quilt, like just how fun it was for my co-curator, Jamie Swartz, and I to write the labels for this exhibition. I was thinking about like we got to use all these words that we normally don't get to use in labels, like unruly and riotous. And it's just that's not usually how you can describe a quilt, but with these you can. And like this one we described as looking like Roderick said, it looks a lot like bunny tails. We also thought it looked a lot like anemones on the seafloor.
Oh yeah,
Just
yeah.
these, and I feel like there's just such an endlessly interpretable quality
Right,
about Roderick's
right.
collection. Roderick, do you want to speak a little more to how these were selected the pieces that are within our permanent collection.
Well, did you said it was a collaborative, and it was your predecessor, Carolyn
Yes.
Ducey, which we're going to be mentioning just shortly as we go around the corner. Um, she was involved. Yeah, it was the, the museum, Carolyn, and I'm not sure who else on the team. Were you there then? Or
Yes, I was
okay,
collections
okay,
manager then. So I got
okay. I
to
couldn't remember
receive and
exactly.
care for these, but I was not on the selection committee at that time.
Yeah. Um, and then I suggested and just kind of wanted to do a wide range. I also I want to speak too about this ability for people to go online, walk through the exhibition, but to go to the labels, to go
Yes.
to that dot and read the label of getting all of the information, which is so wonderful. Should we turn the corner and
Yes.
um,
Let me close this. I hope I don't make anyone dizzy with
right.
my driving. Did you want to discuss which one
Yeah,
do you want to
yeah.
go to next?
No, I wanted to, another thing that I was so pleased about this exhibition, it wasn't just about the quilts that I found that the museum acquired and I donated, um, that it is about the contemporary work that has come into the museum, um, partly as a result of my bringing artists awareness to the museum. Um, that's so exciting to me because I'm now on the advisory board. I was on a committee with Carolyn, just an advisory committee that she put together of people of so many more eyes out there in the world to bring artists to the museum's attention. No one person can track all of that. And there were people that I was seeing, again, primarily through social media, specifically Instagram, just seeing artists that, appear on my page and start following people and seeing the work that they're doing. So there are, let's see, one, two, three, four pieces in this exhibition that I had my hand involved in some way. The artists themselves have spoken of the work that I've done prior with quilts and bringing quilts to people's attention. That has been an influence, and one can't get kind of more satisfaction out of knowing, oh, the work that you've done in this particular field has had an impact on people. And just like the woman that spoke before saying, Unconventional, Unexpected, the book just helped her see these kinds of quilts in new ways. So
Right.
this artist is Basil Kincaid. I started to see him on Instagram. Um, he was talking about what really drew me to him. He was talking about his struggles as an artist, and just the economic challenges. And at that early stage, he spoke of, I mean, almost being on the edge of homelessness. I think at the time he was living in a church attic and using it as workspace. But he just was so open about his life and struggles as an artist. And he was starting to show things quilt related. When I initially started this collection, I was just looking for quilts. Well, then all of a sudden, I'm seeing a wonderful top, an unfinished quilt top that, in some cases, it had that, to me, unexpected, unconventional aspect to it. In other cases, some of the tops they appealed to me. Um, they felt like orphans, and all of a sudden I'm starting to buy quilt tops and thinking, oh, I'll do something with those someday. Who knows what? I think it was in about 2018, I finally realized I need to put some of these tops out into the world. I'm not going to finish them. I don't know
Mm.
what I'm going to do. I started approaching quilt makers, artists whose work I really liked and said, I would love to give you a quilt top or two for for you to do whatever you want with. Finish it, cut it up, whatever. Put it on your gallery or your studio wall, just if it brings inspiration. Well, I reached out to Basil and um, I sent you a photograph of the actual top that this is cut from. He took me
Okay.
literally. He
Let me find which one that is. I
it's
believe it's this one. I think I got it.
string top.
This one.
Yes, yes, that's the one. I mean, it has a very log cabin feel to me. It is a string block construction. Um, I just thought it was beautiful. And I also the back, it's a foundation piece. It's mattress ticking was the
Oh,
backing, and I love that. I mean, I was drawn to that as almost as much as the front. But and again, thinking, oh my gosh, if this top gets batting and quilted, no one will know that mattress ticking was used as the foundation. So it was just those simple little and kind of quirky things that would get me quite excited. So
there's
um,
the back.
yeah, I
Yeah.
sent this and a few others to Basil. Well, he probably made an announcement, but I was tracking, following his career, and I find that he has a solo show in London at a gallery called the Carl Cos Costal Gallery. It was in September of 2019, and I see this piece in the gallery. Like, I recognize that quilt top, that backing. The title of this is called Self-Portrait. I Am Not My Labor. So a number of the other pieces in the exhibition, I think it was copying dollar bills and printing them on cloth. How
Mm.
did you not get arrested for counterfeiting? Um, but they were beautiful, very structural pieces. This is a jacket that belonged to him, and I think it's like a cleaning, a bleach bottle, and then there is a mop. Um, so it just, again, it was so exciting to me to see this in a contemporary art gallery, his work. Um, I just thought,
And in an unconventional way for quilts.
exactly, exactly.
Right.
And they were starting. Sanford Bigger's work was that
Yeah.
was another one whose work I'd started to see out there. He's painting on quilts. Um, Basil it was more of an emerging artist at this time, and I reached out to the gallery to see how is it priced. I was got in contact with Carolyn Ducey, sent pictures, and said, I would love to see work like this in the collection at International Quilt Museum. And it is now. Um, I put I put money up for it for part of the purchase because I believed in it. It turned out to be Basil's first museum acquisition as a
Fantastic.
so again, it just a lot of satisfaction was in this whole piece. There's now a second piece in the collection by Basil, and his career has really taken off.
I
Um,
love that you were part of that for him.
well, I'm too. I make it just it makes me very, very happy to be able to participate in those kinds of ways.
Absolutely. And I love that through you, that bridge is being created between quilts and then art, and there's that age old question, are quilts art? I happen to believe they are. It sounds like you do too. I believe
Of
you do.
course, yes.
And, but oftentimes they stay in their own lane, I guess you could say, right? And then here it's a complete departure from the lane. It's sculptural in a way that a quilt hanging in the air or on the wall or placed on a bed is not going to be. And, we could talk about, well, I know a lot of people get a lot of feels about using old quilt tops or old quilts in
Yeah.
other ways.
There's,
And I, for a long time, was in that camp. I'm not going to lie. For a long time, I thought, oh my gosh.
yeah, I,
But then I think, well, what else is it better to leave it in a closet
right,
and be
right.
nothing?
Exactly. And
Or,
that's what I felt was going to happen with this large collection. I had at one point about 100 quilt tops, um, that no, I have to put them out into the world. And just that action of sending them out to people, and people one were generally in disbelief. You want to give this to me? Really? Are you sure? I said, yes, I'm absolutely sure. Do whatever you want with it. Do nothing or do whatever. So I mean, that just felt so good, that action. So let's jump next. So these two definitely go together. And
okay.
the quilt top on the left, was the frontispiece for Unconventional and Unexpected. It's on page 1 and on page 2, the front and the back. I sent you a picture
Right.
of the back. I mean, the front was incredible to me. We're just seeing a portion of it. Um, it just I'd never seen that pattern done. Just
And
this,
here's the back.
yes, here's the back. And again, it's like, wow. It's like, the thought of, again, it being covered up and never being seen again. But, just this fabric that she chose for the backing of it as her foundation, and then seeing the fabric from the front come through. I mean, it's just, again, to me, that's equal in value of being seen and shown and appreciated as the front is. And then there's a couple of places where she used just a plain fabric, and a couple of most of the stripe fabric is running vertically, but then in
Mhm.
other places she's turned it on a horizontal. So that is in both editions of Unconventional Unexpected. So you see the front and see the back. The quilt to the right was made by Freddie Moran, a wonderful, wonderful quilt maker and teacher, lived in Orinda, California. Freddie's known a lot for her face quilts, which the International Quilt Museum did an exhibition of some of her face quilts. But Freddie came to me and said, I love this quilt top that's in Unconventional and Unexpected. Do you mind if I make my own version of it? And I said, I don't mind at all. I can't wait to see what you do, what you make. So I was out at her studio space. We were working on deciding on the face quilts that we were going to send for the exhibition. And I walk in one day and here's this quilt on the wall, which was just so thrilling to see. Freddie loved color. Um, I think what's her tagline, kind of like red is a neutral. Do you remember?
Oh, let's see.
Um, but she
Yeah.
taught so many people, just she was so well loved. She's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But I said, Freddie, what are you going to do with that quilt? Is it for sale? And she said, of course it's for sale. So I said, how much? I bought it. again, knowing that more than likely, I mean, that it would be going to a museum, more than likely
Mhm.
the two would be to stay together. Um, I decided with my husband Jack that when Carolyn Ducey retired last year, that we were presenting this to the museum in her honor as a donation.
Oh, I
So
love that.
yeah, I do too. Um, Carolyn is so important to the museum, continues in, she's doing some wonderful projects in her retirement, but um, she was there from the beginning and she has just did such a great contribution to the quilt world and all of the work that she's done. So we wanted
Absolutely.
to do this to honor her. And so now these two pieces are a part of the International Quilt Museum collection. So the one hanging up high is,
I wonder if we can get close to that. Whoop, that's a little strange.
yeah, I guess it is a little hard.
No, that's me probably. I'll go back this way. You go ahead.
I'm not sure. I've not navigated
There.
the site
How
completely
about that?
myself, but yeah, no, that looks great. Um, this quilt, I broke my own rules on this. This quilt dates, I put it, always have put quilts in a 25-year time period, learned that from the Orlovskis. Um, Circa 1900 to 1925, I believe, is what the label said. And it came out of Canada. I thought it would be great to have a Canadian piece in the collection. So it's a very simple pattern, this grid or lattice work, but one can maybe guess by now. The red was the piece, and this red diagonal, and she doesn't take it all the way to the end from one end to the other opposite side. She moves it, so you've got a partial red
Oh,
line and then that very small red line up in the upper right corner. There's some wonderful greens in it that aren't kind of almost acid green that aren't coming up real easily here. Um,
how about
in
that?
the
That's a little
lower,
easier to see.
yes, yeah, the lower right corner, you see that
Hmm.
acid green. Um, it's the reverse side is again a simple nine patch. It's a tied quilt, and me, it just worked so beautifully. It was never my intention of with the unconventional, unexpected quilts. I mean, I do date the book 1950 to the end of to 2000, and I show examples in the book of what I see as unconventional quilts that were happening before. They clearly were happening before. It didn't just start at the last half of the 20th century. There are examples out there of women just making it different than their neighbor did. Um, and it also, I think it wasn't a set intention in the beginning as I started collecting, but just to see, again, so many of these quilts were used. They're just kind of everyday quilts. They weren't the kind of quilt that I said I felt like I would be the one going into an antique or secondhand store and looking at things that everyone else just walked by. I was opening them up and looking and appreciating and just seeing the beauty to myself, to my eye.
While we're there and in this art conversation, I, Denise asks if you could talk about the difference between contemporary and modern in your mind, I guess.
I'm not an art historian. I don't know what the dates of what's considered modern art and then when contemporary comes into play. Um, certainly what was now considered modern art was contemporary art at the time. So,
So maybe contemporary is of that moment,
well,
right?
yes, or as I said, I don't know the exact definition of where contemporary art starts. Someone more knowledgeable than I in terms of art history would be able to answer that.
All right. Well, we'll move on then. Which one would you like to go to next?
Well, um, how's our time? Because we're just like a third of the way over.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
we are 45 minutes in.
oh, see, let's do look at both the next two because they are, well, let's go to the Zack Foster and the Sabrina Gschwandtner. We'll regretfully jump over my favorite string grids, but so here's another example of, and this is
This
why
one?
America can't have nice things.
Okay.
A top in my collection that was dispersed, and this one was sent to Zack Foster because he's a young quilt maker who I learned, again, saw on Instagram, met early, liked what he was doing, um, sent him this quilt top. Again, to do whatever you want to do with it. And all of a sudden, then I seeing some time later on Instagram, it's on his design wall, which was his apartment in at that time in Brooklyn. I think the kitchen wall was being used as his design wall when he needed it. And these letters, there were and this, and he slowly he knows how to use Instagram,
Yeah.
building this piece on showing it, sharing it online, and gradually at some point, and this is why America can't have nice things. I thought, that's interesting. What does that mean? It was a phrase that I was not familiar with. Zach explained to me it was something he grew up with, and in his home where mother would say something, the kids broke something,
Hmm.
mother would often say, and this is why we can't have nice things.
Yep.
Break. Um, he chose to put in the word America I think a bigger, larger political statement. I've learned since um, um, the singer, um, Taylor Swift.
Ah,
There's a line in one of her songs where she either it's why, and this is why America can't have nice things, or and this is why we can't have nice things. So it was fascinating to learn this phrase. So Zach comes to me and says, I've backed it. I've, appliqued this on. He said, I just can't figure out how I'm going to quilt it. And I said, have you ever thought of tying it? Again, just because was drawn to the tied quilts that were in the collection and just as just a suggestion. Well, he does. And the the way that he tied it on the words, I think is brilliant.
yeah.
Again, just adding that another dimension that ties can do. Um, so I thought it was fabulous. And I said,
His
what are you
his
going to
artistic vision is next level.
It is. It
It
really is.
really
He's
is.
definitely one that's to be watched, and
Yeah.
he's just doing amazing things in the quilt world. Um,
Yes.
I said, "What are you going to do with it?" And he said, I don't know." I said, "I hope you do things with it, but if at some point you decide you're going to sell it, please give me first chance at it, I would like to acquire it back. But, that's only when you're ready. Um, I
I
forget
love
how long it wasn't that long ago, but he said, okay, I will sell it. I was thrilled to have it back. I used it in the exhibition in Birmingham Festival of Quilts in 2022.
Yep.
I was so impressed, Tara, that when I told you that I was doing the exhibition there, you said, "Well, I'm coming." I went, "Whoa!" And you show up, and we had fun in Birmingham
The
during the
best time.
festival.
Yeah.
The other exciting news is I had kept all my information about the tops, but I was more concerned in when I had names of doing the genealogy on quilts, if I was able to place the person, where the information said that they were from. This turns out I thought it was an anonymous maker. I go back through my records and find out I do know the name of the woman that made the top. Um, Found a lot of information in genealogy. She was born and lived her whole life in Dayton, Ohio. Her name was Lucille and also went by Lulabelle Level. Um, Learned her, she then shows up being married. I didn't find a marriage certificate, but I did then find information about divorce. She, let's see. She divorced June 19th, 1969. 1969 is the
Mm.
year I graduated from high school. But she was a housekeeper. She worked for the Postal Service, um, was a mail carrier. She died November 15th, 1993. So, I mean, I was just thrilled to then we now have the actual maker of the top, and
Mhm.
Zach.
It's a
So
complete story.
the complete story
It's a
now.
complete story. And I would love to see her face seeing it hung and at the International Quilt Museum.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
way could she have foretold that.
And all of these quilts the same way. What would these makers think
Right.
being
Yeah.
hung in a museum and appreciated, seeing them published in books? I actually thought when Unconventional and Unexpected came out that I might hear from people, either families or possibly, I mean, it's possible that makers still could have been alive
Hmm.
or a family member. That didn't happen. That never happened. But I just been excited that genealogy records, they're still adding information to, and things that when one tried in the beginning didn't always appear, but then more information. So let's go to the
Yeah.
next contemporary maker, Sabrina Gschwandtner.
Okay.
And
That's not
that is
her.
no, that's on to no, go to the other way. It's right next to,
Pardon me.
yes,
This one.
this one, made of film, actual film. Um, I learned about Sabrina when I was at a memorial service in Mendocino for Linda Reuther, who, with Julie Silber, had Mary Strickler's Quilt Gallery. Um, and Pat Ferraro, who was the filmmaker that made the film Quilts in Women's Lives,
Yes.
was there and said, "Have you heard about this woman, Sabrina Gschwandtner?" She was in New York at the time, who's making quilts out of film strip. And Pat had said, I gave her um, cans of film from Quilts in Women's Lives because she needed to dispose of it in some way. I guess film doesn't last. Um, but it had all been digitized, but Pat no longer wanted to be carrying around all of these canisters of film. She sent it to Sabrina, and Sabrina used that in a number of quilts. Nearly all of her pieces, which are illuminated from behind, um, she uses film. The film that is she used has a connection to the project that she's working. It isn't just random, pieces of film, but the fact that she did so many using the film from Quilts and Women's Lives. Well, um, I was, let me look at my notes here.
That's
Art
incredible. While you're looking, I just want to say I am gobsmacked by this.
And one really has to see it in person, being photo, because it's film and illuminated from behind. It is hard to photograph it,
Sure.
um, and to see it this in this way because they just are really incredible. Um, Art Forum magazine in Sabrina had a show in 2017 at her gallery in Los Angeles. And Art Forum wrote a review of that show. And I'm reading the article, and the reviewer calls out there are two quilts specifically that like really stood out for her. One of which was called Hands at Work Crazy Quilt, and in parentheses for Roderick Kirakoff. And I'm like, what? I'm like, wow, wait a minute. Wow. I had no idea. I had met Sabrina in New York. She then had moved to LA. I did not know that she was making this quilt and titling it with my name in the title. I certainly was thrilled. Um, you know, and again, it's like, hey, this needs to be at the International Quilt Museum.
Yeah.
And um, her work is being collected by museums all over and private collectors. I borrowed a piece from a collector for a show that I mounted at the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles in 2015. But again, I put some money up. I contacted Carolyn and said, I think Sabrina's work is worthy of being in the International Quilt Museum's collection. And here it is.
Here it is. That
So,
is spectacular. And it has so many layers of meaning in it with it being from Quilts and Women's Lives. It was a pivotal film.
right. Sarah, is there anything that you want to add on?
I mean, I think, like you mentioned at the beginning, just having pieces that you have collected over the years in conversation with quilts from contemporary makers who have been so inspired by your collecting and your writing and the way that you help people learn to see quilts differently, to ask different questions of them than what we might traditionally ask. I think it really came together so beautifully, and it was just such an easy exhibition to curate. The only hard part was making the selections, um,
Right.
not putting in every last possible thing. Um, yeah, I just think the impact that you've had on the quilt world generally, but particularly on artists, is just so very special.
It really is.
Thank you. And again, I still am humbled by it and honored by it. So we're now on the last side of the show. The cat tops was just fun, fun, fun. It's an unfinished top. Um, Again, just like I could not pass this up. These cats in the basket, it's to me, I saw them like the basket handle is attached to the top of their head. If you if you zoom in closer, it looks like the cats are well, it's like there's a mustache
They're smoking. So.
and they're smoking.
Yeah.
They're smoking.
Their
It's
faces
just
are
like
so incredible.
is like how weird. They almost have almost a human face on
They
them.
do.
So fun, so playful. Um, I do I know. Um, I didn't get all of my homework done to see where this came from, but it's on the
We
label,
have
so people can.
Okay.
yeah, we have possibly made in Missouri.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Um, so yes, that just was fun and playful and unexpected.
Oh my gosh. Oh, and then the cats on their sides at the
Yes,
top and the
yes,
bottom.
yes. At the top and the bottom, she laid them down on their sides. It's just
Gravity has no effect on these cats.
None. None,
right,
none whatsoever.
right.
All right.
Um, so then the wonderful text label that I believe Sarah wrote, which was really
Jamie and I wrote that
awesome.
together, yes.
The portrait of me is by Marilyn Henrian, wonderful quilt maker. Um, Marilyn actually hosted the book party in New York in her apartment um, for the American Quilt when it came out. That was my New York
Oh,
book party was at her apartment. The Empire Quilt Guild, which was one of the big guilds in the country, they were the hosts, but Marilyn hosted it. And we've had a wonderful friendship, relationship since. Um, she made these quilted portraits of family members, some other kind of notable people in the textile world. Um, some years later, then I would stay at her apartment in New York when I would be visiting. So I would see myself hanging on the wall in her home. Um, she donated this. I mean, I think there are other pieces of her work, of her wonderful, very architectural and mostly New York based um, quilts are in the collection. Do you know, Sarah, about how many of Maryland's
Give
are?
me just a couple seconds and I'll come up
Okay.
with a precise number for you.
Um, and I didn't realize that this was at the museum. So I was very touched when I first saw the exhibition and saw Marilyn's portrait of me, which the last time I'd seen it, it was in New York on the wall of her apartment.
that must be a strange feeling for you to just see yourself, especially with as humble as you are about it all.
We have 3 other pieces by Marilyn in the
Okay.
collection.
Yeah.
Fantastic. A total of 4 then.
So let's look at number 8. This may be our last one of
Okay.
I was invited, it was a Smith College alumni kind of group that invites who are in the Kansas City area. They invite speakers to come give presentations and a weekend things. And I was invited one year. I brought my before PowerPoint existed, 3 projectors where I'd done a really beautiful show based on the American Quilt, the book, The American Quilt, um, but was held at the Nelson Atkins Museum. And I met a conservator there named Scott Heffley, who collected primarily African American objects of all kinds, furniture, paintings, sculpture, quilts. He invited me to come over and look at things that he had collected and just lots of things that he found with pretty close radius to Kansas City, either directly from people. I think also he would go to there would be specific kind of flea markets or markets for that African American people would um, host or do where they were selling their work. Um, so he got lots of things locally and in the Midwest. Showed me a number of quilts. After seeing things, I said, "Do you sell your work?" "Oh, yes, of course." I come home with three quilts from him. Um, and this was in 1998, and promptly put them away, stored them. At the time, was not putting quilts on my bed, our bed, to use. It was a quilt. It was special. You put it away and never
Hmm.
look at it. And it wasn't until when I really actively started this collection of unconventional and unexpected was in 2004. Um, but I realized, like, I got down the quilts out of the closet that I'd bought from Scott in 1998 and realized, oh, the collecting started then. Because I think two of the quilts from those purchases are in the collection at International Quilt Museum. At least one and possibly two. Scott came out, a book was published of his quilt collection, and I'm not sure if it was in conjunction with an exhibition. I think it might have been, and I don't remember what year, but he had an eight quilt, an infinity symbol. It wasn't one that he had shown me. I don't know when he had acquired it, but I just was fascinated. Never seen one like it. Um, it just appealed to me. My birth date is the 8th of April, so I have an affinity towards the number eight. Um, but just the uniqueness of this piece, each of the blocks is like a finished little, I think, quilted quilt block. And you've seen it more recently than I, Sarah, in person, but I believe that's the case. It's not a potholder quilt, but I guess it's similar in that the blocks were pieced and quilted and then joined together.
Quilt
Um,
as you go is what I think we would call that.
okay.
Yeah.
Then the eights are done by machine, and it's just over and over and over again. And this, was before long arm quilting machines. It just was so odd and quirky and unique to me. Um, this came to me very late in the collection. I kind of like was hold the presses for when the book first came out, when Abrams first brought the book out to get it photographed and included in the book, because as we know, there are only two. This one that Scott has and the one now that was in my collection, now is at the International Quilt Museum. It did come with a name, and that she had lived in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. I tried and tried and tried through ancestry.com to do research on it. I also went to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania because their library has a big genealogy section. Um, just was not able to find her name. She was supposed to have been an African American woman. Um, Last name of either Jarvis or Jervis. First name Regina, or also went by the name Reggie. So more research has to be done to see if we can find her. Um, and if there's a connection between the two makers, the one that Scott Heffley has. There's just a lot of mystery around it. But besides all of that, to me, it's an incredible piece of art. Those four blocks, like a four patch, but it isn't really a four patch. The grid work of the quilting in it, just the color placement of it. Um, Again, I think it's just kind of one of those. masterful quilts that exist with a lot of mystery around it and kind of more information, hopefully, to be found.
I wish I had time to dig into that for you, for us. I love researching that kind of thing, the maker, and seeing if we can nail it down. But one thing, and maybe someday, but one thing I wanted to note here is I'm often talking about with guilds and so forth about how I think it's important for us to look at pieces like this and understand that while there may have been scarcity at play and so forth, there were, and it may look haphazard to at first glance to some
Right.
eyes. It may
Right.
look like it was just a jumble of whatever, but I see deliberate design choices being made.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's really important that we understand, I think, that even in the face of scarcity, and even when you have meager materials at hand, that doesn't mean that even if it was something meant for utility, that it did not have artistic
Right. Right.
vision imbued in it.
Right. Right.
Right. And I think this is a really good example of that. You said the color placement. I mean, where she chose to put those blues and what color squares went on top of the other color. I mean, it just goes layers and layers of that.
Right. And, I also think about these makers didn't have a design wall. They were
Yeah.
making it on the floor or on the kitchen table or in their lab of just a different time, a different setting. And here's what they came up with.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
I think you touched on something really important, Tara, that Jamie and I really felt throughout the process of creating this exhibition, which is that I think when we hear about makers using what they had at hand or their available materials, then sometimes it almost implies that whatever the result of that use was is sort of accidental or sort of um organic in a non-deliberate way, like they
Right.
accidentally created art. And I think you're absolutely right that like they're using makers who were using their available materials to still create something really thoughtful and interesting. I mean, to me, that's very similar to like an artist who might choose to work in a single color or something like that. Like there's so much creativity to be found in constraint. And I think these quilts really show that. And especially when most of these people, I would venture to say, I think Roderick, you'll probably agree with me, would not have considered themselves artists.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so I think that's really, really an incredible part of Roderick's collection too, is just like the awareness to what is all around us if we are willing to open our eyes. And I mean, I think it helps
Yes.
to have a incredibly discerning eye like Roderick, but it really is, it's there, it's everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Thank you, Sarah.
I like the word that you used there, deliberate. I think that's I'm gonna start using that one too. It's we can see deliberateness in it.
Do we have any other questions or comments from people?
Let's see. Bill Volkening is on, and he says
Hi, Bill.
The Zack Foster piece is phenomenal. He's so glad it's part of this exhibition. And let's see what else we have. He also said he's been very excited. There are some contexts for artists using quilts in their work, and he noted Rauschenberg.
Right. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. The
for sure.
bed that's at Museum of Modern Art
Mm-hmm.
was a log cabin quilt that supposedly was kind of found on the street. Um, and yes, that's a wonderful example. And it's known that a lot of kind of well-known artists did collect quilts, had quilts in their collections. The other, I forget who pointed this out to me, um, about Look and Life magazines that were just all over the country. Even people that may not have a lot of money may have had a subscription or had a copy. And in Look and Life magazine, a lot of artists, mostly New York, their work was being shown. So it wasn't, their work wasn't just isolated to a New York audience, but it was out there kind of all across America. Um, then, I mean, the question too is like, how much were artists influenced by quilts that they had?
Yeah.
And vice versa. Were any of these women, had they seen pictures of an artist in New York and their modern art, um, that had in some influence on them in some way? But just this, there, the isolation, I think, was kind of the point of this was, there was a lot of information disseminated. Certainly, it wasn't social media, it wasn't the internet, but the
Mm.
magazines that were out there and were in homes all across America, and just what all they were
And
showing.
then, and sometimes the newspapers too. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think there is that. I don't know that there's ever just a one-way street on inspiration, right? It's often this cross pollination or a soup of pollination.
And
It's
then just designs that are just out there, um, in the world, in people's minds. I mean, just shapes of how
yeah.
shapes are used, whether it's with paint or with a sculpture or with cloth. And to me, it's so exciting to see how much contemporary work is being done now with fabric and textiles of all sorts, weaving, um, quilts, quilting, just all kinds of, and the acceptance of textile art, where before that just was most, lots of museums or galleries just didn't want to have anything to do with it. Made by women. Oh, it
Right.
was had a
Yeah.
practical use. Oh, it's craft. Just all of these things that they're just, it's all changing and evolving so much.
and and has been over the course of the last 50 or so years. We can look at the Whitney show in 71 as a defining moment in that growth and that maturity of what we see of as art in these quilts, right? Because Jonathan and Gail were looking at these quilts, they said, as paintings. So when you said earlier that you really look at these pieces because you're such a lover of art, I know that you go to museums a lot, and you're constantly absorbing art, right? And you said that you see them as paintings or pieces of art, and that reminded me of how Jonathan and
Yeah,
Gail
that they can.
collected in the late
And
60s.
I grew up with a grandmother that sewed. I sat in her sewing room, watched her with, using her treadle sewing machine. So, I mean,
Hmm.
that is also very much a part of my draw to quilts, and my involvement with quilts was just that connection to grandma. And so many people
Yeah.
have talked about the grandmother connection. um, but yes, a woman making this using her hands or her sewing machine and fabric and needle and thread to create something of beauty, of usefulness, of comfort and warmth, that all plays into it too. Um, so
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today. Sarah, as well, for joining us from the museum. I know it's late for you. And I appreciate you sticking around after hours.
Yes, thank you.
And
And thank you for suggesting this, to want to promote this show and
Thank
bring
you.
it out there to people. The show is up until the end of March.
yeah, March 28th,
March 28th
right?
is the last day. There's going to be some type of closing program, so keep an eye out. That will
A
get
great
announced.
way to, sorry to interject there, Rod, but a great way to do that is to get on the International Quilt Museum's mailing list. So
Yes.
internationalquiltmuseum.org is where you want to go to do that.
And follow on Instagram and consider memberships. I'm now speaking as an advisory board member, but the International Quilt Museum is just such a great institution and a wealth of textiles from all over the world. So it's just an
Yeah.
incredible institution that.
World-class collection, world-class galleries, and the staff there. The way y'all hang quilts, nobody else does it like you guys do.
Totally
It's
true.
always smashing. It's a smash hit.
Yes.
We have
Yeah.
a really great team.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
I'll be talking to you each soon, I hope.
Good. All
All
right.
right.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you,
Roger.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.